No. Anyway, since we've already on time, we will start and we will have time to onboard him. So, everyone, bonsoir à tout le monde. Soyez les bienvenus à The Talk. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Strategy Talk. And as usual, this is still this is a series of high-level conversations that strategies consultants have with experts from all over the world on critical issues that affect Africa, that affect the continent. And it is hosted by this is African Consulting Firm defining and implementing solutions for the African continent. The conversation this afternoon is bilingual. Sorry, it's starting raining here in probably my sound is not good. I will try to do my best so that you hear me very loud and good. So I was saying the conversation to this afternoon, this evening would be bilingual with the translation in English and French. So please look at the bottom screen and select the language that you are more comfortable with, either French or English. Great. So this afternoon, we will talk about food security in Africa with this question. Is Africa organizing itself to ensure the food security to its huge population after the experience of COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine? We have seen several crises on the continent, from food shortages to soaring price disruption chains. More than 10 countries are reported to extreme insecurity by the FAO in 2022. Numerous initiatives were taken at various levels, global and national, to mitigate impact of these were launched by institutions with the participation of the private sector and the civil society organizations. Okay, it seems that we have technical problems. Do you hear me very well?
Yes, I'm hearing you, but it tends to be breaking. I'm hearing you, but it tends to be breaking from time to time.
This is probably due to rain. So let me fix this.
Now you are clear. When you said let me
now
fix.
Am I okay? Then let me come again. I was just saying that this afternoon we will be talking about food security in Africa. Is that okay now? Am I still clear?
Yes.
Yes, it is clear now.
Good, good, thank you. And the question we have on the table is this: is Africa actually organizing itself to ensure the food security to its population after the experience of COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine? It's because since sequences of the food crisis on continent, from food shortages to soaring prices and disruption in production chains, more than 10 were reported to be in extreme food insecurity by the FAO in August 2022. Numerous initiatives were taken at various levels to mitigate the impact of this crisis. Some of these were launched by international development institutions, others by governments. Some of them were with the participation of the private sector and the civil society organizations. For considering all this experience, we can ask ourselves, is Africa more equipped to handle the crisis itself and ensure sustainable food security for its population? Discuss that critical question, we have 4 guest speakers, we have 4 panelists with us. So first of all, we have Mr. Ernest Obi. He is the principal managing partner of the company Obi Associates and also a former head of Agriculture Department of the ECOWAS Commission. Welcome, Mr. Obi, and thank you for making the time to be with us this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Do you expect me to start, or you're doing other introductions?
Yes.
Are you doing other introductions?
Yes, I am doing other introductions. I'm going to introduce the 4 of you before we start.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. So our next panelist is Mr. Odunayo Omotosho, also known as Ayo. He is the founder of the African Food and Agriculture Entrepreneurs and the Brace Program. So welcome, Ayo, and thank you for making the time to be with us this afternoon.
Hi, Baba.
Yes.
Good afternoon,
Hi.
everyone. All right, it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to a productive discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our third speaker is Dr. Gudula. Dr. Gudula Naiga Basaza. She is an entrepreneur and also the co-founder and managing director at Goody Leisure Farm. Welcome, Dr. Gudula, and also to you. Thank you for making the time to be with us this evening.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, our 4th and last speaker is Mr. Driss Belfadla. He is an executive member of the UNAGRI and also a French speaker. So I will introduce him in French. Bienvenue, Monsieur Belfadla, et à vous également, merci d'avoir pris de votre temps pour être avec nous cet après-midi. Nous ne vous entendons pas bien, Monsieur Belfadla. Oui, je vois votre main levée, mais malheureusement, on ne vous entend toujours pas. Votre micro semble ouvert. Vous l'avez fermé maintenant, vous pouvez l'ouvrir à nouveau. Oui, non, il est encore fermé. Oui, à présent, vous pouvez vous exprimer. Oh là là, le problème persiste. Alors, nous allons peut-être avancer, M. Belfadla. J'ai du mal à vous entendre. Je ne sais pas si c'est un problème technique avec votre ordinateur. Mais de toutes les façons, nous tenons vraiment à vous avoir parmi nous parce que nous comptons beaucoup sur vous pour avoir la perspective de l'Afrique du Nord au cours de cette conversation. So, now we know all our 4 panelists. Then, dear listeners, we welcome you once again this afternoon. As we all know the topic then. So to start the conversation, we will set the scene with a quick look at the general trends in food security on the continent. Let me give the floor to my colleague, Joël Soso. Joël?
Oui, bonsoir et merci Baba de me passer la parole. Bonsoir une fois de plus à tous nos participants en ligne et à nos panélistes qui sont avec nous. J'espère que vous m'entendez très bien.
Oui, très bien, Joël. Très bien.
OK, merci. Donc, bienvenue à cette discussion qui va se pencher sur le problème de l'insécurité alimentaire en Afrique. Je m'appelle Joël Sossonjanga et je vais vous présenter quelques données et tendances clés sur la question. C'est forcément des données que nos panélistes et nos différents experts connaissent déjà, mais c'est juste pour planter le décor. Alors, c'est quoi le contenu de nos tendances? Donc, on va commencer par se situer. Il s'agira pour nous de faire un rappel de quelques données. Et pour planter le décor, on va commencer par nous situer à travers la définition, les causes et les facteurs qui expliquent l'insécurité alimentaire en Afrique et dans le monde. Ensuite, nous allons rappeler l'impact des 2 crises majeures de ces 2 dernières années sur l'insécurité alimentaire en Afrique. Puis nous aurons quelques statistiques sur les populations affectées. Et enfin, nous allons partager quelques initiatives, tant au niveau international qu'au niveau de l'Afrique, qui ont été prises pour lutter contre l'insécurité alimentaire. Nous allons commencer par la définition sur l'insécurité alimentaire. Et cette définition nous est donnée par la FAO, qui est le Fonds mondial, Fonds alimentaire international mondial. Donc, on va prendre cette définition comme elle est. L'insécurité alimentaire existe lorsque des personnes n'ont pas un accès physique ou économique durable à une nourriture suffisamment sûre, nutritive et socialement acceptable pour mener une vie saine et productive. Ça, c'est la définition qui nous est donnée par la FAO. Et dans cette présentation, nous allons utiliser le tableau de référence de l'IPC qui fournit une échelle commune pour classer la gravité et l'ampleur de l'insécurité alimentaire et de la malnutrition aiguë. Ce tableau propose notamment 5 phases. En matière d'insécurité alimentaire, ici, le focus sera beaucoup plus sur les populations qui se retrouvent au niveau de la phase 3, donc qui est la phase du crise. Et jusqu'au niveau du niveau 5, on parle en termes de catastrophe alimentaire ou de famine. Il faut rappeler que la phase 3, c'est vraiment la phase où il y a un déficit de consommation un niveau de malnutrition aiguë élevé, également au-dessus de la normale. Vous pouvez voir sur les différentes phases les définitions. Quelles sont donc les causes qui sous-tendent l'insécurité alimentaire en Afrique? Au niveau mondial, il y en a principalement 5 qui sont valables également pour l'Afrique. On parle ici des conflits, de l'insécurité, les phénomènes liés au climat, les crises économiques, les épidémies, les ravages des insectes et les maladies des animaux. Pour des exemples, on a par exemple des cas où on a vu toutes les récoltes de pays complètement mangées par des criquets. Maintenant, pour certains facteurs, il y a également certains facteurs qui aggravent l'insécurité alimentaire en Afrique. Et ces facteurs sont fortement liés. On va commencer par l'insuffisant développement du secteur agricole en Afrique. On sait que le développement du secteur agricole en Afrique demeure insuffisant et on note un manque de politique efficace pour assurer la sécurité alimentaire à long terme. Or, la population continue de croître. Le continent africain est actuellement le deuxième continent le plus peuplé, avec plus de 1,2 milliard de personnes. À côté de ça, il y a cet exode rural et l'urbanisation qui est toujours plus croissante en Afrique. Donc, ce sont des facteurs qui contribuent aussi à l'insécurité alimentaire parce qu'elles réduisent la main-d'œuvre agricole qui est censée produire les aliments dans les zones rurales. Et enfin, à cela viennent s'ajouter les répercussions des crises internationales qui perturbent généralement les chaînes d'approvisionnement. On va le voir plus tard avec le focus sur les deux crises, notamment la COVID-19 et la guerre en Ukraine. Il faut souligner que la guerre en Ukraine a eu un impact. On peut avancer, s'il vous plaît. Oui, devant. Next. OK. Il faut souligner que la guerre en Ukraine a eu un impact majeur sur l'approvisionnement en matière d'énergie, le pétrole, les intrants agricoles, les produits alimentaires. Et ceci a entraîné une hausse des prix en matières premières en 2022 pour les pays qui faisaient déjà face à des défis économiques énormes après la pandémie de la COVID. Next. Arrêtons-nous sur la situation des engrais, parce qu'on sait que les engrais sont essentiels pour la production agricole. La guerre en Ukraine a amplifié la tendance à la hausse de ces engrais-là, et ce qui était déjà en augmentation depuis la COVID-19. On voit qu'en 2022, l'année 2022 a été l'année où les prix d'engrais ont atteint leur pic, en affectant ainsi les pays africains qui sont généralement importateurs de ces intrants agricoles-là pour booster la production. C'est ce qui peut se voir à travers ce graphique. En dehors de ça, on voit également la perturbation des chaînes d'approvisionnement qui entraîne inéluctablement l'inflation des produits sur le marché. Ici, dans ce tableau, on peut voir l'évolution des prix des produits alimentaires en Afrique de l'Ouest, dans le Sahel et au Cameroun. Dans tous ces pays, l'inflation a dépassé 10%. On note des pics dans certains pays comme le Ghana, avec 50,5%, la Sierra Leone ou encore le Nigeria. Next. OK. Au niveau de l'Afrique centrale et australe, on a également noté des niveaux d'inflation particulièrement importants, comme on peut le voir au Zimbabwe, qui connaît également beaucoup de challenges en matière de gouvernance. L'inflation a atteint 285%. Mais on a également noté les pays avec un niveau inférieur à 10%, comme la Tanzanie et la RDC. Il faut également noter que malgré la baisse des prix mondiaux des denrées alimentaires à la fin de 2022, les prix restent supérieurs au niveau d'avant la pandémie de COVID-19. Donc, l'inflation alimentaire était supérieure à 10% dans 38 des 50 pays ou territoires connaissant les crises alimentaires en fin d'année 2022. Maintenant, voici une vue des populations affectées par l'insécurité alimentaire en Afrique. Donc, les principaux pays frappés par l'insécurité alimentaire sont, donc, on peut voir parmi les 10 pays les plus touchés par l'insécurité alimentaire aiguë dans le monde, 4 sont des pays africains, c'est-à-dire la RDC, l'Éthiopie, le Nigeria et le Soudan. Et dans ces 4-là, environ 81 millions de personnes sont touchées par l'insécurité alimentaire aiguë, avec au moins 20% de la population affectée en RDC, en Éthiopie et au Soudan. Si on examine la question de la nutrition infantile qui est essentielle, on constate que parmi les 9 pays ayant le plus grand nombre d'enfants souffrant d'émanciation, qui est une forme de malnutrition sévère dans le monde, 4 sont africains. Il s'agit du Nigeria, l'Éthiopie, la République démocratique du Congo et le Soudan. Les 4 pays sont dans le top 5 mondial et comptent au moins 15 millions d'enfants de moins de 5 ans qui sont concernés. Et en ce qui concerne un aperçu sur les populations en insécurité alimentaire dans la sous-région, dans les différentes sous-régions en Afrique. En Afrique centrale et australe, en 2022, nous avons 47,4 millions de personnes. En 2023, ce nombre est passé à 44,24 millions de personnes. On note une légère diminution. Cependant, il faut noter que deux pays ont été analysés en moins. En Afrique de l'Est, en 2022, c'est 56,85 millions de personnes contre 30,7 millions de personnes en 2023. On note ici, il y a une forte diminution. Donc, 2 pays en moins ont été pris en compte. Et maintenant, en Afrique de l'Ouest et dans le Sahel et le Cameroun, en 2022, c'est 41,5% de 45 millions de personnes. Et en 2023, ce nombre est passé à 43,91 millions de personnes. Ici, on note une légère augmentation, mais également un pays en moins. Mais globalement, ce qu'on peut voir ici et qu'on peut constater ici, c'est que la situation reste préoccupante avec plus de 118 millions de personnes en insécurité alimentaire en Afrique subsaharienne. Next. À présent, quels sont les principaux facteurs de l'insécurité alimentaire dans le monde? Il faut garder à l'esprit, en regardant ça, que les causes sont multiples et diffèrent vraiment selon le pays ou la sous-région qu'on étudie. Dans ce tableau, on peut voir les pays dans lesquels les conflits et l'insécurité politique et celles liées aux ressources ont été le principal facteur de l'insécurité alimentaire aiguë entre 2022 et 2023. Donc là, on voit dans les différentes sous-régions qui ont été étudiées et les pays concernés. Next. Ici également, il s'agit des pays dans lesquels les chocs économiques ont été le principal facteur de l'insécurité alimentaire aiguë en 2022 et 2023. Et il faut noter pour le cas du Soudan, qu'on vient de préciser qu'au vu de la situation politique actuelle, le nombre a clairement évolué. Et dans ce dernier tableau, on voit les pays dans lesquels les conditions météorologiques extrêmes ont été le principal facteur de l'insécurité alimentaire. Et là, on va voir les pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, également dans l'Afrique de l'Est, qui ont ce problème de sécheresse. Alors, quelles sont les initiatives au niveau mondial qui ont été prises et ont été mises en œuvre pour lutter contre la sécurité alimentaire? Il convient de noter qu'il y a eu beaucoup d'initiatives et on a cité ici quelques-unes. Donc, on n'a pas pris toutes les initiatives. On voit essentiellement l'initiative de l'ONU qu'on peut voir dans le tableau, l'initiative de la Banque mondiale, l'initiative de la Banque mondiale avec le G7, mais également cette initiative du Fonds alimentaire mondial. Il y a également certaines initiatives qui ont été prises au niveau africain, qu'on peut voir, entre autres, celle de l'Union africaine, mais également celle de la Banque africaine de développement. Bon, le cadre étant établi, nous pouvons revenir sur notre question. Après la COVID-19 et en pleine guerre en Ukraine, peut-on considérer que l'Afrique s'organise efficacement pour assurer la sécurité alimentaire de sa population? On peut dire que le débat est lancé et sur ce, je vais repasser la parole à Baba, notre modérateur, pour la suite du débat. Merci à vous.
Merci bien, Joël, pour cette présentation du contexte général qui va plus ou moins porter toute cette conversation. Merci d'avoir partagé ces données, ces statistiques, hein, que, chers panélistes, chers participants, vous connaissez certainement autant que nous, sinon mieux. Ceci, c'était un rappel pour comprendre la gravité du problème que nous souhaitons évoquer, que nous souhaitons aborder, examiner cet après-midi, ainsi que les différentes initiatives qui ont été prises depuis l'avènement de la crise alimentaire évoquée. So for those who just joined us, welcome to this strategies talk, which is a series of high-level conversation with experts on critical issues that affect the continent. This is a talk which is usually hosted by Strategies, which is an African consulting firm defining and implementing solutions for the African continent. So with this said, I will then come back to you, dear panelists. We will start our conversation. I will direct the question to each of you, and you will provide your inputs in order to enlighten our listeners on the issues that we are talking about this afternoon. So I will start with you, Mr. Obi. As a former member of ECOWAS, please, could you tell us how, of course, at the regional level, you experienced the crisis and how you managed to address it in terms of strategies and actions to be carried out on the ground?
Thank you very much, Baba. I hope all of you are hearing me clearly.
Yeah.
With regards to the question that you have asked, for both the COVID-19 and the Ukraine war, it came to Africa, it came to West Africa as a surprise. Surprise in the sense that we were not prepared for it. So we had to be looking for solutions when it came. We did not have strong structures because when COVID-19 came, for example, our health systems almost collapsed. It almost collapsed. That was one aspect. The other aspect, when COVID-19 came, because of the fact that there were no cure, no vaccines, our governments had to take steps to prevent the spread of the COVID. What are some of these steps? One was like closing our borders, and that had an impact on agriculture. We were not able to trade in agricultural commodities. We were not able to trade in inputs in West Africa, you know. So that had a terrible effect on our agriculture and food security situation. And because we were not prepared, we were not able to take proactive steps. We had to wait for solutions from the outside. So one lesson that came out was that whether health systems, agriculture and food systems, trade and transportation systems, it was very clear that they were weak. And as a result, Africa suffered quite a lot because of the weak systems and institutions. You know, although somebody would argue that in terms of the COVID, we did not have many deaths like other parts of the world which had a better health system. But in terms of overall livelihood and economic well-being, the African continent suffered quite a lot. And as a result, our leaders, political leaders, economic leaders, the private sector, everybody was forced to look for solution because our countries, our economies were being shut down. And what were some of the solutions? Politically, in West Africa, the ECOWAS Commission had to organize statutory meetings, starting with the minister, starting with the experts, the agriculture, health experts. Then we went further to have ministerial and heads of states summits. And all these meetings, I must state clearly, were done virtually because we cannot move, we cannot talk, we cannot meet in a physical format. So in terms of the strategies, we had to decide very quickly short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategies. Short-term strategies, as I said, was to save lives so that people don't die. Also, short-term is the COVID disrupted agricultural production and productivity. People were suffering from hunger and malnutrition. How do we get food to them? So these were some of the short-term strategies that we had to put in place. The medium-term was how do we get out of COVID and revive our economies? You know, how do we also ensure that we have enough food? Because already, as was said by the earlier speaker, agricultural production and productivity had suffered quite a lot in West Africa before COVID because we had issues also of insecurity in the Sahel. We had issues of pastoralist farmers conflict. So when the COVID came into the region, it affected it all the more. So this for us was an eye-opener. And also in terms of the medium to the long term, like the ECOWAS Commission had to utilize its food reserve program to target at vulnerable populations in the member states. So this had to be done to save lives and property. And after that, also for the long term, the heads of states and government had to give directives on how do we address emergencies. Also, mark you, this for West Africa, this was a second emergency because earlier in 2015, we had Ebola, which affected some of our member states. Then came COVID. And after the COVID, when we thought that we were getting over it, the Ukraine-Russia crisis came in. So it compounded the whole thing. Now, what we need to do is to really ensure that we prioritize agriculture.
Yes, but before you move forward, Mr. Obi,
Yes.
I know you're already looking at the solutions, but this is something that we will come back to in a few minutes.
Okay, no
I
problem.
just want to kind of catch up all the idea you shared regarding the way you experience the crisis itself By the crisis, I mean the food crisis, which was a kind of consequence of both the COVID-19 crisis and the war in Ukraine. So you said in West Africa, you were surprised, you were not prepared, and to tackle the issue, you had to uh, kind of look for the solutions that were coming from outside of the region. And to do so, you had to organize statutory virtual meetings with all the key stakeholders within amongst who were the experts on how to address the issue. I will come back to you. We're still on the problem, looking at whether you had an idea of the amount of people that were actually affected by such a food crisis. As you remember, Joel showed us that in 2022, we had almost more than 40 million people in the region being affected by food insecurity. So how did you have time to kind of see such figures and to appreciate, to take stock of the problem itself? But I will come back to you just to give you time to reflect on it. Let me move to those who were actually also considered as citizens. But I would like to look at you, Ayo. You are from the civil society organization, from an NGO, and also from the private sector. Let me ask you too, how did you experience, how did you approach the crisis as an NGO? I mean, the food crisis itself.
All right. Thank you, Baba. Can you confirm hearing me?
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
Okay. So regarding the crisis, right? In today's intercontinental world, we are all aware that when a shot is fired in one country, it also has a ripple effect in other places, and not just in the agricultural space alone. Even looking at the technological space, financial space, something happening in one part of the world tend to have ripple effects in other places. So far, you guys have to have some form of trading and communication together. So the crisis itself, from the private institution, we've seen it in two perspectives. We've seen it, one, as a challenge, and two, and also as an opportunity. So it was more like a catalyst or an enabler that actually showed itself as a challenge and also as an opportunity for us. So as a challenge, when we say as a challenge, so prior to all of this crisis, we all know that our food system itself is not, we've not been food secure in Africa generally prior to all of this crisis. So the crisis just came to now worsen and opened up, expose the African continent to the whole world that, oh, this is how bad our food system is, this is how bad our agricultural system is, our agribusiness system is. So it tends to just bring that exposure to the whole limelight to see how bad it is. And then as a result of that, they were just like the earlier speaker mentioned, we now started to have some form of response mechanism instead of proactiveness. So that was seeing it in the form of a challenge. They're now seeing it as a form of opportunity. They now tend to see that, oh, we've always been talking about food security. Our food system is not secured enough. We need to work on it. We need to do this. So this now brought about an opportunity for people working in this space to be innovative, to be creative, to leverage on our expertise, especially in the private institution, to then speak more to the government, to let them know this is what we've been crying so far, this is what we've been saying, and now the reality is done on us. We need to strengthen more of these capacity development programs we've been doing. And so we saw it as an opportunity in that aspect. And then also regarding this crisis itself, so after this crisis itself, now everyone in the value chain, anyone in the food system is not aware that our food system is actually bad. Before, it's probably those in the high level that is saying the food, African food ecosystem is not sustainable, is not secure. But now, as a farmer itself, you would reach out to some farmer, and now they could actually tell you that agricultural food system is not secure, because they also now seeing the ripple effects. Before, a farmer is just concerned about, let me produce and get my food to the market. But now they are seeing the effect of that crisis in the form of increased price of inputs. There is no fertilizer for them to grow. So everyone across the value chain is now aware, is now conscious that there's an urgent need for us to actually tackle this food security system. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayo. So with you, we see that actually our food system is weak and not secure. This was the reality that the crisis helped us to kind of discover. So it was a challenge to overcome all these obstacles that were brought up, but also an opportunity to kind of solve, to address, to fix the problem that appeared. Thank you. So let me now turn to you, Dr. Gudula, because I know that you are also representing farmers in sort of a way. So now we know that the food system, our food system was weak as the crisis brought the light on it. So you who are in the heart of the food system, of the crisis itself, how did you experience the crisis, and how were you kind of involved in the responses that were developed either by the NGOs, the development institutions, or by the states, the governments?
Okay, thank you very much. I've put my video so that you can put a face to the voice.
Thank
but
you.
At times it affects the network.
The quality,
so I'll
yes.
remove it, but at least you have an idea of the person who is talking. So thank you very much, Strategies, for giving us another opportunity to talk about issues that are of very great importance on our continent, in our times. The first question about the crisis, I need to give context here. I am a farmer. I've been farming for the last 13 years. I run an incubation center where we work in all the 10 regions of our country. I work in 30 districts, and I work in 750 parishes. In these parishes, I have youth that I have incubated at my farm, and they go back to their communities and start incubating other youth along with the white meat value chain. We have a network of 112,900 youth that we are working with. So the question of the farmer is dear to me because I'm in the middle of this entire thing. First, when they announced COVID-19 lockdown, we are one of the countries that are the most compliant regarding the lockdown. We were not allowed to move. We had to stay in our houses. This was a big crisis of our lifetime, which we had never seen. It was, we could only get communication through the TV. Now, after this whole lockdown, the markets were closed down, movement was closed down, so the farmer had no way of taking their food to the person who is supposed to buy. And again, at the hindsight, our farmers hardly have any post-harvest handling facilities. We are normally selling fresh food. We are very good at fresh food. So here we are, closed. You have your food, it's ready. Definitely, immediately, there was a lot of wastage. We started engaging with government, but this was all online. There was a lot of Zoom, there was a lot of communication. And through what we call the private sector foundation, which is our main policy-making body for all the private sector. Finally, we secured an opportunity to have the lockdown lifted for farmers. Farmers were allowed to go to their gardens, and they were allowed to go to the market, and they could even sleep in the marketplace. But there was still another obstacle. There was no transport because transport had been closed. So the farmer had to sell to the nearest market. And normally your nearest market, everybody there is a farmer. So who is actually buying your food? This brought in something new that was exciting because they allowed the motorcycles to deliver items from one place to another. The farmer was forced to go digital immediately. We started seeing so many flyers running around on our WhatsApp. I have cassava, I have eggs, I have meat, which was a beautiful thing. Finally, food would be delivered at the different homes. Myself, as a farm, we got a database of over 2,000 people that were supplying. This was a big advantage because we were supplying them at the price of the supermarket or the market. So we cut off the middleman immediately. That was one of those things that we really celebrate around this whole COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah.
But it means that there are those people who were left out, those who had chosen to be not compliant in the digital world. So, but for us, as our network, we benefited from our digital presence, targeting especially the high-end customers who had the phones, who had the data, and who could access our adverts. It made us also known to people we didn't know because people kept passing on our information to different people. Everybody was on their phone somehow. So people got to know what we were doing. Now, as COVID-19 we're getting out of COVID-19, then we have this issue of Ukraine. It looked far distant, but there is a way it started affecting us, especially in pricing. We started seeing an increase in prices of inputs that we use for our farming. And then the prices of food started increasing. That would be exciting for any farmer to have food increasing. But very few people started buying food. People started buying small portions. I can give an example. Somebody would bring a full truck of matoke. I hope people know matoke, bananas. It would go that one day. But now it takes 2, 3, even 4 days for this matoke to go. So the rate at which our products are going, people are making choices. They are eating less. They are not supporting our market the way they used to do. And this is because of the high prices. It is getting very expensive to feed, but we are busy producing. Now, as farmers, the other thing that came up, the importance of aggregation. The cost of transport after the within this Ukraine war issue, fuel increased. And our fuel never goes down. When it increases, it keeps increasing. I don't know up to what point it will ever stop. So fuel increased, the cost of transportation became an issue. So farmers have now learned that we can work together. Instead of each one of us hiring a car to take my products, let us put all the products in one car and use one transport.
I see.
So we have, am I clear?
No, yes, you're clear.
Yes, so we have now come to a point where we realize, which we should have done long ago, but we didn't, but the crisis has helped us realize that we need to aggregate and reduce certain costs. So that one is a reality now. And for us as a network, we have now formed our youth into what we call cottage industries. You find that we have 100 youth in a particular place doing maize, and they are all marketing as a group. And now we are going back saying, okay, you are marketing as a group, but everybody has their own color of beans. Now we are saying, let us make sure we have the same color of bean, so that we are marketing the same bean, since we are packing and selling it as one group. The other thing that came up was you want me to stop?
almost just to conclude on that point.
Okay. The last within the effects of this crisis was credit. It became very difficult to access financing, but even those who had loans, it was very difficult for them to pay. So government started looking at these issues and were engaged online mainly, and they started putting up certain funds to support people at a lower interest rate. They put funds in the what we call Uganda Development Bank here. They introduced funds for the youth to see how to mitigate. There were also COVID relief funds, some of them by different donors, to ensure that we keep afloat. But of course, the funds never spread to everyone.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gudula. As I see, the crisis started with a very difficult situation for you, but as Ayo stated it when he was speaking, he said the crisis opened up a window of opportunities. And then in your country, what you did was you managed to seize those opportunities to kind of increase your sales. You made sure you organize, you manage yourselves in order to ensure that you continue selling your products. And also, at the end, you even had the support from the state in what you've already started, which is very good. So now let me go to Mr. Belfadla to see, we remain at the level of the farmers, but we want to see the regional, we want to have the regional view. Donc, une fois de plus, bonsoir, Monsieur Belfadla. J'espère que cette fois-ci, vos problèmes de son se sont améliorés. Est-ce que vous pouvez parler pour qu'on s'assure qu'on vous entend bien? Oh là là, le problème persiste. Peut-être, est-ce que vous pouvez vous déconnecter? Vous pouvez vous déconnecter et vous reconnecter parce que ce que nous, et peut-être vous prendrez le temps de réfléchir à la question que je voulais vous adresser, c'est-à-dire qu'au niveau structurel de l'union des producteurs, des fermiers, est-ce que vous avez, comment est-ce qu'au niveau infrastructurel, au niveau structurel, vous avez accueilli la crise? Comment étaient les échanges avec les différents membres de votre plateforme pour adresser les problèmes qu'ils envisageaient et éventuellement quelles ont été les solutions que vous avez développées pour pouvoir accompagner les différents membres de vos plateformes, soit au sein de la PAFO, soit au sein de l'UNMAGRI et plus précisément même de l'Union marocaine dont vous êtes membre. Donc, vous prenez le temps de réfléchir à cela, le temps d'essayer de résoudre le problème de connexion que vous avez, c'est-à-dire que vous vous déconnectez et vous revenez pour voir si on pourra trouver une solution à cela. Voilà. Merci. So while Mr. Belfadla is trying to fix his problem with his sound, let me come back to you, the three of you. From your first inputs, you said, first of all, the crisis, the food crisis itself was a surprise. You were not prepared, and you even noticed that the food system that you were in was weak and not secured. You tried with the means that you had to seize the opportunities that were presented, for sure, at the level of the farmers and the NGOs, the civil society. But when we look at the states, the governments, those who are ruling, those who are actually decision makers, they kind of looked at what could be the support from outside to address the issue. They had several meetings and so on. But in fact, and now I will come back to you, Mr. Obi, did you have a look at the consequences of the crisis in terms of how many people were affected? And did you find, did you kind of look for strategies, for measures to make sure that those people in the development approach would no longer suffer from such a crisis? What did you put in place? And if you put that in place, was it only with the support of the development organizations that were coming from outside, or and was it also with the participation of the local NGOs, of the farmers organizations, of the civil society, that were all part of the food system that was actually weakened?
Okay, thank you very much, Baba. The COVID-19, and as I said earlier, just came out of the blues, and our systems were not fully prepared because some of our systems are weak. But notwithstanding that, it was a question of survival. How do we survive? Are we going to allow our people to die en masse? The answer was no. So the governments, the civil society organizations, regional bodies like ECOWAS, African Union, and development partners had to come together to find a strategy to save the day. Because, as I said, in terms of the food security situation in West and Central Africa, by the time COVID came, 48 million people were already suffering from acute food shortages, and that was a large number. So when COVID came, with the closures of the borders and other restrictions, it added to the problem. So solutions had to be found. Now, one important solution that had to be found was to look inwards. This is important. Look at the region. What can we do? Because the same COVID was affecting Africa as it was affecting America and Europe and Asia. Everybody was trying to find a way of surviving. So we had to look inwards. What can we do with the resources we have in terms of food supply, the grains we have? How can we share it around? And so in the case of ECOWAS, they had to go to their food reserve program to ensure that food was targeted at vulnerable groups, at very vulnerable groups in the member states. So what was done? We had to do quick and rapid assessment of the situation. Some countries were better off than others. So that's one aspect. The other aspect that, as my colleague from Nigeria said, it created challenges and opportunities. This gave ECOWAS and the member states the opportunity to look at their social protection systems, which again was weak because some of these systems are not properly funded. Most of our leaders would tend to fund physical projects. When I mean physical projects, projects that would give them popular votes, like a road or a school. But when it comes to social projects like nutrition, like food security, they give it less preference as opposed to building a road to their constituency or their villages, etc. So the social protection systems were ignited. How do we strengthen the social protection systems in the country? And also, my dear colleagues, the issue of funding of our agriculture came out clearly. Most of our governments are not adhering to the Malabo Declaration of 10% of national expenditures to agriculture. Some countries it's 3%, some is even low as 2%, you know, so we're not investing. So what happened was, why I'm saying it came to us as a shock, we were now exposed, you know, we are now exposed, and hunger and deprivation was now looking at us Africans in the face. So we had to be proactive in that regard. Also, what compounded the problem, after we were able to manage the COVID crisis a bit, and I say a bit, then the Ukraine war started. And that also affected our food supply situation, because we depend on Ukraine and Russia for wheat, for oil seeds, for even the flour that we use to make our bread in Africa. And that was not forthcoming because of the war. The whole thing became complicated. You know, again, of course, plus the crisis of energy, because energy supplies were also affected, trade routes were affected. So, as a continent, these are important lessons that we learn. And when we say we learn, it's not just learning. What do we do in terms of moving forward, you know, so that it doesn't become a recurrent issue all the time? We run around to beg for food, you know. This is very, very critical.
Okay, thank you very much. So with this, your intervention, we see that actually when we say the food system was weak, is that we have a problem of funding. No one is actually implementing the Malabo declaration, which says every country should contribute 10% of its national budget to agriculture to make sure that this crisis, or to make sure that food security is ensured. No one is doing that. So this is the first problem. Are we actually taking lessons so that we start respecting that principle? It's the first point. Secondly, you said the food supply chain was disrupted due to the war in Ukraine. So where do we see supplies? You said we should look inwards. Are we taking measures so that we kind of produce inwards what is necessary for our nutrition? This is a second problem. I think with the other speakers, we will probably identify other problems. But before that, I see that Mr. Belfadla is back. Is the problem solved? It remains. I don't know what we could do. Maybe Mr. Belfadla, je pense peut-être vous devez vérifier sur votre ordinateur, sur votre clavier, que la touche, sur des claviers, ça dépend de l'ordinateur que vous avez, la touche micro peut être fermée. Donc, vérifiez que ce n'est pas fermé, que c'est ouvert pour l'assurer, parce que sur l'application Zoom, votre micro est ouvert. Vous êtes supposé parler, on vous entend. Si ça ne va pas, c'est qu'il y a un problème peut-être avec votre machine. J'espère que vous pourrez continuer à réfléchir pour trouver une solution. So now I want to come back to you, Ayo. So because you said the crisis came with challenges and opportunities. So we've identified already some key points that were actually the problem: funding and the supply chain. As part of the analysis of the situation, do you, within organization, did you identify other problems that need to be addressed in such a way that the continent is able to address such an issue by itself as of now?
Papa, sorry, we could take that again. Your line was breaking, so I didn't get your questions.
So you didn't get me very well. So I was saying, as an NGO or part of private sector, did you identify other aspects of the problems that need to be fixed, that need to be addressed so that the continent is able to address the issue of food crisis in the future? Because with Mr. Obi, we've identified at least two. The problem of funding, that was a problem. That's why we had to look at, as he said, somehow beg to look at the support from the from outside. And two, we were actually relying on food supply chain that was actually coming from outside again, Ukraine and Russia, in terms of wheat. So since this was no longer possible, did we think about starting producing these crops within the continent? This is, so we have then two key problems that need to be addressed if you want to be able to fix the problem and to address it in the future. Sorry, excuse me. Do you see other problems?
Okay, thank you once again. Regarding the problem, so as a result of our work at African Food Chain Maker, where I currently work, we work with agripreneurs across African countries. And then if you get to interact with them in several of our engagements and you ask them for some of these challenges they currently experience in their agribusinesses, top of the list, just like the other man's mentioned, is always funding, right? They always need funding to either scale up their business to be able to produce in large scale. Other challenge you also find with them majorly is around market access, right? So beyond just, and this market access, I would like to term it in form of synergy, right? When I say synergy in between all of the value chain players. So somebody who is, as a producer, I would want to have a certain form of off-taker, or someone who will be able to off-take my product after producing, right? So it doesn't make sense for me producing in large quantity when I'm not so certain of the right market that will be able to off-take my product. And that will bring me to talk about synergy across all of these value chain players. So there's a need for, there's a problem of synergy between the producer, the off-taker, the processor, the package, and then the distributor. All of these, they need to work in alignment within the food ecosystem. So we always be correcting something within the space where we work, that we should stop looking at agriculture as a whole, like as an entity in terms of production, but we should start looking at it as an agri-food ecosystem, an agri-business, whereby if one aspect of the value chain is functioning well, the other one also needs to function well. If not, there will be a form of imbalance, and then the whole food ecosystem will also be in trouble. So I will tend that in form of market access and synergy across the value chain player. Then another challenge we currently have and is affecting our food security system will be around capacity building in terms of infrastructure. So it's the known fact that most of the African farmers and Nigerian farmers specifically are majorly rural farmers. And then in terms of adoption of some of these modern technologies to help them increase their productivity is very, very low. And so we in my organization, we work around programs that aim to strengthen the capacity of these agripreneurs, these rural farmers, to ensure that they're able to produce sustainably and they're able to transition into a resilient agribusiness. And lastly, amidst other problems that we have, I also want to talk around the issues of food wastage, right? So I know we have food loss and we also have food wastage. Food wastage actually comes from food loss, sorry, itself comes from across the value chain in terms of distribution. That's the food that is being wasted as a result from the production to the retail store. So we have that challenge across our food ecosystem because of our lack of storage facility, our lack of infrastructure, transportation system that would enable food good from the production down to the retail. So that's also one key challenge that we've also been able to identify in the food ecosystem.
Okay, thank you very much, Ayo. So you've actually added
C'est bien
some...
maintenant, c'est bien.
Oh, finally. C'est pas bien, c'est formidable.
Merci.
Enfin. Alors, très bien. Vous me permettez juste de conclure sur l'intervention du panéliste avant vous, et puis je reviens à vous. So, with you, Ayo, you said we can add to the list of the problems that need to be addressed if we want to be able to, if Africa wants to be able to solve the issue of the food crisis as of now. So we had previously the funding and the supply chain. So with you, we've added the problem of capacity building. Do we have the skills to kind of produce enough and with the variety so that we can feed our all population? Two is infrastructure and the transportation system, which is really key to kind of distribute the products from the production areas to the markets. And also, given that issue of infrastructure and transportation, we have a lot of food loss and wastages. So these are the key elements that we need to fix, that at the level of the decision makers, at the level of the institutions, nationally or regionally, we need to take measures to make sure that this is clearly prepared with food reserves. Okay, now let me finally go to Mr. Belfadla. Monsieur Belfadla, avec vous, nous voulions examiner un peu comment l'organisation des producteurs, des fermiers a non seulement vécu la crise alimentaire, mais comment est-ce qu'elle s'y est pris pour accompagner, soutenir tous ses membres, mais aussi comment est-ce que l'organisation a travaillé en collaboration avec les gouvernements ou avec les institutions régionales pour résoudre ou réduire le problème de la crise alimentaire sur le continent. À vous la parole.
Merci, Monsieur Dodo. Je suis très heureux à participer avec vous à cette importante rencontre qui traite un sujet d'une grande importance pour notre agriculture et pour les organisations paysannes africaines en particulier. Pour répondre à votre question, monsieur, il y a 3 points à souligner. Il y a les initiatives prises au niveau mondial et continental, il y a des stratégies et il y a des mesures à prendre. Pour les initiatives mondiales, il convient de rappeler que de nombreuses initiatives prises à différents niveaux pour atténuer l'impact de cette crise alimentaire. Au niveau mondial, l'Allemagne, assurant la présidence du G7, a lancé avec la Banque mondiale l'Alliance mondiale pour la sécurité alimentaire. Au niveau continental, l'ancien président de l'Union africaine, M. Macky Sall, a entrepris une visite diplomatique pour rencontrer le président russe afin de permettre l'approvisionnement de nombreux de nourriture et d'engrais des pays africains. D'autres initiatives publiques et privées ont été entreprises au niveau régional, au niveau régional, national, par les États et le secteur privé. Certaines de ces initiatives ont été menées par et avec l'appui des organisations à l'aide internationale. Pour les stratégies, j'ai fait une douzaine de points. La guerre en Ukraine a donc fortement impacté le système de production des petits et moyens paysans agriculteurs africains, mais grâce à leur forte implication et au rôle crucial qu'ils jouent tout au long de la chaîne de valeur agricole, les organisations des paysans ont pu atténuer certains effets à la guerre sur la sécurité alimentaire en Afrique en mettant en place des stratégies et des initiatives importantes. Le premier point, c'est l'augmentation de la production agricole pour satisfaire la demande croissante des populations en produits agricoles, notamment les céréales, légumineuses, maraîchage, etc. Deuxième point, c'est l'optimisation de l'utilisation de l'eau d'irrigation par le recours à l'irrigation au goutte à goutte, tout en économisant eau, engrais, énergie et même les produits phytosanitaires. L'appui des instituts et des organismes de recherche et des universités apportés aux agriculteurs pour leur permettre d'utiliser de nouvelles techniques de production. Un autre point, c'est l'initiative prise par Sa Majesté le Roi qui s'engage à dédier plus de 4 millions de tonnes d'engrais en faveur des agriculteurs africains en 2023. Le but est de stimuler les rendements pour 44 millions d'agriculteurs dans 35 pays, y compris au Maroc. La promotion de l'agriculture durable pour faire face aux impacts des changements climatiques. L'encouragement de la production alimentaire locale et la gestion des risques liés aux conflits et aux catastrophes naturelles. L'encadrement des agriculteurs locaux par les organisations paysannes pour aider à renforcer leur résilience face aux crises alimentaires. La promotion de l'utilisation des semences et techniques agricoles adaptées aux conditions locales et spécificités des sols et terres agricoles. La diversification des cultures pour réduire les risques de perte et de récolte de l'amont jusqu'à l'aval de la chaîne de valeur. L'implication des organisations paysannes à tous les niveaux pour atténuer les effets de la guerre et à ce travers la collaboration étroite entre les agriculteurs et les organisations gouvernementales et non gouvernementales ainsi que les acteurs du secteur privé. Le dernier point, c'est la mise en place du système de stockage et de distribution des produits agricoles afin de permettre aux communautés locales d'avoir accès à des aliments frais et nutritifs tout au long de l'année. Pour les mesures à prendre, compte tenu des efforts entrepris par les organisations paysannes et les États des pays africains, il est important de renforcer leur résilience dans le processus de développement agricole et rural. Pour ce faire, un certain nombre de mesures sont à prendre en considération afin d'atténuer les effets des crises auxquelles le continent et les organisations paysannes font face. Le premier point, c'est le renforcement des capacités des organisations paysannes africaines dans le domaine agricole et rural, notamment à travers les formations sur les nouvelles technologies appliquées à l'agriculture, la gestion des cultures tout au long du cycle et la commercialisation des produits. Deuxième point, c'est la promotion de la coopération verticale et horizontale des organisations paysannes africaines à travers la création des réseaux pour faciliter le partage de connaissances et des échanges entre les membres. Cela passe également par l'encouragement de la coopération des ces organisations avec les entreprises opérant dans le domaine agricole et les gouvernements locaux. Un autre point, c'est la mobilisation des financements pour soutenir les actions et projets des organisations paysannes africaines et tout en facilitant leur accès au financement auprès des banques et institutions financières en améliorant les incitations et subventions des États, notamment en cas de crise. Le développement et la maîtrise des circuits de commercialisation des intrants et des produits agricoles en encourageant l'établissement des partenariats avec des entreprises nationaux et internationaux leur permettre de disposer des intrants agricoles et des prix à des prix raisonnables en cas de crise. L'encouragement des organisations paysannes à utiliser de nouvelles technologies d'information et de communication dans le domaine agricole et agroalimentaire et leur faciliter l'accès à des plateformes développées pour chercher des informations sur les marchés, les prix, les dernières innovations en matière de recherche, développement des semences, etc. L'avant-dernier point, c'est le renforcement de l'implication effective des organisations paysannes dans les programmes et stratégies des gouvernements pour limiter les effets de la guerre et toute crise éventuelle et se diront toute la chaîne de valeur agricole. Et un autre point, c'est le dernier que pour moi c'est le plus pertinent, c'est l'exploitation des sources disponibles non encore explorées dans le continent africain, notamment l'eau et le sol très fertile en faveur de la production agricole et l'amélioration des rendements en vue d'assurer la sécurité alimentaire des populations africaines. Merci pour votre attention.
Merci beaucoup, M. Belfadla. À travers votre intervention, on comprend qu'il y a beaucoup de solutions, beaucoup de mesures techniques qui sont possibles. Et d'ailleurs, que les organisations paysannes ont pu identifier et qu'il faille adresser ou présenter aux décideurs pour que cela soit établi dans l'écosystème agroalimentaire, effectivement, pour assurer une sécurité alimentaire durable. Donc, merci. Merci pour votre point de...
J'ajoute si c'est possible, parce que je ne sais pas que vous avez visité le salon de l'agriculture au Maroc.
Allez-y en 30 secondes.
Il y avait 39 pays africains qui assistaient au salon. On a discuté, on a même fait des contre-programmes, on a fait beaucoup de choses cause à ces crises.
Merci. Merci. Ça veut dire que la palette de solutions, la palette de propositions est vraiment riche pour pour traiter ce problème. Maintenant, la problématique se trouve dans la mise en œuvre, l'application au niveau des États dans une logique de collaboration entre toutes les parties prenantes. Et c'est effectivement ce point-là qui va constituer la prochaine question que nous allons adresser à Dr. Goudoula. Dr. Goudoula, let me come back to you. And this will be the final intervention before we open the floor to our listeners. So when you were describing your experience with your organization in your country, you said that the states were actually supporting you, maybe because they saw that you as farmers were already trying to find your own solutions, and then they said we should bring some support to this. So based on that experience, how do you assess the collaboration between the farmers' organizations, maybe the civil society, the private sector, and the states? how do you see it? How do you assess its level of implementation in terms of bringing the key solution to the problem?
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity once again. One thing that came out of this crisis, agriculture became an essential, the importance of agriculture, and because the food we produce became medicine, everybody wanted to improve their immunity. Now, this has enhanced, because, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. We lost you a minute, but now you're back. It's okay.
Okay. From this crisis, everyone gave priority to agriculture because it was one of those few sectors that supported us.
Actually, Dr. Gudula, your line is really breaking. We hear you from time to time. Okay. Dr. Gudula, I think I will ask, we're not getting
and
you.
other people. Most of the people that were in other sectors is closed. Oh, for you, so what can I do? Should I record and send the audio? What do you advise?
Okay, Dr. Gudula, I think your line is breaking. I will then hand over to, we'll move forward in the conversation. Now, let me just sum up all your inputs. So the crisis was actually a surprise. We were not prepared. Our food system was weak and not secured, and we sort of tried our best to seize all the opportunities that were kind of popping up within the situation, within the crisis. And a lot of measures were suggested by the civil society, the NGOs, the farmers' organizations, the decision makers at the national and regional level were kind of having meetings, getting in touch with their partners from the outside world at the regional level, at the national levels. We even had these initiatives that were taken at the international level. So we had a lot of things that were actually implemented to address the issue. But the key question we have is, with this, did we learn? Did we take the key lessons that transform, that take us to the preparedness, so that for the next time we are able to do that? And this is the key question. And also from what Dr. Gudula was actually saying, we had some examples of how the states were actually being in touch with the farmers organization and so on. So this is the point. Now we've seen that a lot was actually carried out on the ground, but still there's some elements that are remaining in terms of funding, in terms of food supply chain, in terms of capacity building, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the coordination bodies where all the key stakeholders could sit together and think and implement the process. So this is how we can summarize the key ideas. Now I will open the floor to our listeners. So if you can just raise your hand or write in the chat the question you have, and identify who you address the question to, or either it's for everyone. I see that Mr. Fofana, is Mr. Fofana still there? So we have a question to all speakers. So this is the question for all of you. From your point of view, are the states and regional organizations doing what is needed to solve the challenge? So let me start with Mr. Obi. Are the states and the regional organization doing what is needed to address the food crisis issue?
Thank you very much, my brother Baba. At the state level and also at the regional level, they are all trying to implement measures that would reduce the negative effects of both the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukrainian war, because there is no choice. If you don't do something about the crisis as far as food and nutrition security is concerned, your people would suffer. There would be hunger and deprivation, and this would lead to deaths. And in extreme cases, it can lead to a lot of instability. Because also, as a result of these two crises, what are you experiencing in the member states and in the region? You see the cost of agricultural commodity, whether it's rice, whether it's wheat, whether it's even the things we produce locally, sorghum, millet, maize, legumes, beans, all of them have gone up. So at this point in time, we have a political challenge because cost of living has gone up and people are suffering. The earning power has gone down because of the high levels of poverty that we are experiencing in the region. So it is very necessary and important that as a region, as countries, as a continent, we must think outside the box. We must increase our production of agricultural commodities. Any nation that relies for its food supply from the outside, whether from Asia, Europe, Latin America, or wherever, you are not guaranteed of food security if you depend on the outside. So what do? We must ensure that we make the right investments in terms of certain critical services, technology, extension and advisory services. We must also have the infrastructure in place in the agricultural value chains. And also, do we have to be getting fertilizers from abroad? The answer is no. If you look at Africa, if it's phosphate, you have in it in abundance in Morocco, for example. You have other macro minerals that would give you your fertilizer, your compound fertilizer. So we must look inwards and invest, and there's, as somebody said, there are opportunities. Like in Nigeria, you have the recently installed Dangote petrochemical industry, which would also have a fertilizer component, So we must invest in Africa. That's where the private sector is very, very important. We create an enabling environment for our private sector to invest, both foreign and domestic private sector.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to you, Dr. Gudula. There's another question. Actually, what are the strategies that need to be taken to ensure that the people have food on their table, no matter the crisis in the future?
I hope you can hear me now.
I can hear you now.
Oh, that's lovely. Now, following from what has just been said, it's important for us to go back and embrace organic farming. When you look at our environment, the vegetative environment that we have, we can produce our own fertilizers, our own pesticides. And this crisis has taught us that, because when we could not get anything imported, we were able to do that. In this whole thing, there are so many opportunities. Looking at the market within, our borders were closed and we were looking for market within. Whenever we are planning to export, the question is, have we exhausted the market internally? I think it's very important that as Africa, we first look at our markets in the country, market systems, our markets in the region, our markets in the continent. I may not have the statistics, but I know Africa is exporting something, and another African country is picking that particular item from outside the continent.
Exactly.
Why can't we go direct to that African country instead of the African country getting the food from a country where we have exported and increasing the cost of the food? Industrialization, agro-industrialization. This is something that we find in our documents. Our national development plans are very, very clear about agro-industrialization. This is now the time to put what is on paper into practice. We have seen our government put some incentives to enable people to do agro-industrialization. But since this is new for a number of farmers, for a number of people, it needs a lot of government incentives. Mm-hmm. The cost of making an industry is still very, very high. Then when we come to the issue of prioritizing agriculture, agriculture is not only food, it's medicine, it's raw materials for other industries. Exactly. Most of the people that I know in my country, agriculture was for the people who had nothing else to do. It is taken as something which is not a profession. Then the ones who are a little bit educated are taking it as a hobby. I have a farm, I check on the farm over the weekend, I call my workers. So it's not being taken as a serious business and as a profession. And this is why I call upon incubation centers to invest in training the people already into farming. They won't go back to agricultural school. They won't go back to universities, but they want tailor-made courses, practical courses, to enable them become good at what they are doing. And let us start looking at the entire value chain, so that we know that when this is produced, it is processed into X, Y, and Z, and this is what is required. And I'll be selling it to Y. The supply chain should also not be ignored. The issue of import substitution. we were importing so many things. In our country, you find somebody importing tomato sauce. On the other hand, we have tomatoes that are wasting away when it's a very big season. So I see that in our country now, we started looking inward and saying, what can we process locally? Then this brings in the issue of the technologies for processing. We would need to learn from countries like India that have cottage industries that use very simple technologies. Or let us even challenge our engineering schools to task their students to come up with simple technologies. How do I dry my tomatoes in my compound? How do I make tomato paste in my own environment? Yeah. The issue of bulking, lastly, the issue of bulking is inevitable. And with bulking now, we can access bigger markets, we can export better. Before, people would come and tell us, there is a market in East Africa, there's a market in Africa, there's a market in Comesa, there is a market in India, but everybody is doing their little something. Now let us embrace production by the masses so that we can bulk, then send those tons that are needed in India, and we all earn. Because my product will go with your product and will be a bulk product. I know you want me to stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much for understanding. Yeah, because you've pointed out a number of technical aspects, but actually at our level here in strategies, the questions, because you know that Mr. Obi talked about the Malabo Declaration, which was touching the agriculture issue, a lot of meetings, a lot of measures, a lot of strategies have been developed about agriculture, how to make sure that people have food, nutrition aspect, and so on, fertilizers on the continent. But this is still not really happening. So where is the problem? Where does the problem lie? Is it at the level of governance? It's a question mark. Maybe now we're going to share the view that we have in strategies, and to do so, I will give the floor to Kawala. Are you there?
Hello, Baba Dodo, and hello to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for a very interesting discussion that we have had with regard to the food crisis in Africa. It has been very interesting once again to hear from different perspectives, East Africa, Northern Africa, West Africa, how the crisis was perceived by the different actors, and also how the different measures that have been taken. From the strategies perspective, we had the privilege to work on the crisis almost from the very beginning, especially after during the COVID crisis and also after the Ukraine crisis. So we just want to put out some thoughts coming from our side of what we have seen. Next slide, please. So one element that our panelists are bringing up, but which we want to insist upon, is the idea of functional states. Some of the solutions that we are talking about today that have been brought up today have been on the table for 20, 30 years. You know, we are talking about the Malabo Declaration. The Malabo Declaration was a reiteration of CAADP. CAADP was put on the table in 2004. So we want to bring out here this idea of functional states. Every time you have a development crisis, you have a problem, it is an indicator that there is some dysfunctionality in the state. And for Africa, an indispensable factor to be able to implement all these solutions that we are talking about is for the African state to be really a functional state that is driving development, that is driving finding solutions, especially for agriculture, which is so crucial for our continent. In development strategies, we often talk about political will, we talk about governance, we talk about capacity building for the state. But in our opinion, this idea of the state's functionality, the state's ability to really drive and implement development solutions, notably in this case, in the area of agriculture, is not sufficiently at the center of what we are proposing. Next slide. And when we talk about the functional African state, we are talking about three things. One is the presence of the state. When we look at the trends and we look at the countries that are having a lot of challenges, we realize that in those states, in many parts of the country, the state is not even present. The state, you cannot find the administration. You definitely cannot find agricultural extension services and those types of things which are truly functional and working for the citizen. Often, the state is not even present in terms of safety and security. We have seen that a lot of the food crisis is driven by conflict. It is driven by conflict, and this idea of presence is key for to be able to implement these agricultural policies. Safety and security, which I have just mentioned, which are not only about physical safety and security, these are extremely important, but they are also about rule of law, about justice. We want people to invest in agriculture, but we have very insecure land management systems in Africa. So people will not do the type of investment into the land that we require for full production in agriculture if they are living in a country where their land can be seized, where they can invest in that land and then find themselves not being able to reap the benefits of their investment, or where they themselves as actors do not feel safe and secure. And finally, a functional state must give hope. There must be hope for tomorrow. There must be hope that, investment means I am planting today to be able to harvest tomorrow. And this is what economic growth is about. This is what hope is about. In agriculture, for some plants, we are talking about planting today to be able to reap your benefits 2 years, sometimes even 5 years from now, depending on the agricultural product that we're talking about. So these elements of presence, safety and security, and hope have to be really functional in our states. And in our opinion, as strategies, we need to put them at the center of defining development strategies and development solutions. If we don't address this problem of functionality of the state, we will keep coming back as Africa, as several of the panelists have mentioned. We solve one crisis today, tomorrow we are back with another food crisis. So this idea of a functional state has to really take on a lot more importance when we are designing responses, when we are designing solutions. Next slide. So I think I've described what we mean by presence, security and sustainability and hope. These are all key elements of the state. And here again, I want to say, for us, state means all of the key stakeholders. So it means government, but it also means a very functional judiciary, a functional parliament. It also means that citizens have their say, because if we do not have strong farmers organizations, if we do not have strong farmers trade unions that can influence, that can come to the table, that can contribute, and also that can hold government accountable, then we will continuously be in this circle of crisis mode. We are putting out the fire, but we have not solved the structural problems, and so the next fire is coming again. Next slide. So in responding to the food crisis, this idea of the functionality of the state, first and foremost, must be part of the analysis, the strategy, and the actions for implementation. So when we are assessing what is the situation, let us take DRC or Nigeria, who have huge numbers in terms of people in crisis, then when we assess and we look at the regions in those countries that have a severe and acute food crisis, we also have to assess where is the state, how functional is it, what is its ability to deliver the solutions that we are talking about, whether it is capacity building or infrastructure or whatever the solution is. We have to assess how functional is the state in that part of the country where it is most needed, not only in the capital city, but really on the ground where these solutions have to be implemented. And in our opinion, state functionality must then be part of both short-term humanitarian solutions when we are going to provide solutions in a crisis situation, but also the longer-term development solutions. And these strategies, humanitarian and development, must be in synergy, because sometimes what we do is that there is a crisis, we come in with the crisis solutions, which are short-term solutions, giving food to people, giving cash to people. We need to do that because people are dying of hunger, but how have we solved the structural problems so that they do not die of hunger tomorrow? And have we looked at the functionality of the state in doing that? And so in our opinion, this element of functionality has to go into the very high level discussions. The African Union has to be much better at holding its members accountable. We cannot have a CADA that was signed in 2004, which is, let me see, what is that now? 20 years ago, practically. And it was signed in 2004. And as Mr. Obi was pointing out, the fundamental CADA commitment, which is 10% of the budget to agriculture, is not respected by even half of the African countries. So we cannot we cannot just be in the talk, taking commitments, writing strategies, making declarations, but we don't have accountability. So this discussion about how we hold member states accountable for the commitments which we know will make the sustainable change in agriculture is one that must go to the African Union, but it is also one that has to go to development organizations at the multilateral level, the World Bank, the IMF, the bilateral cooperation between Morocco and Cameroon, between the United States and Cameroon, between Germany and Cameroon. The discussion about the functionality of the state and holding the state accountable to the commitments which it has made has to enter these discussions. Another key thing that we see, even for us as a firm that accompanies governments and accompanies various organizations, the discussions tend to stay at the central level. So there is a discussion with the ministry at the capital of the country. Most of the time, food insecurity is not in the capital. Most of the time, food insecurity is acute in the remote areas, and the involvement of local government, the strengthening of local government so that it too can play its part in terms of designing strategies, helping to implement strategies, and most importantly, holding accountability and being able to say, yes, these resources actually got to our region. Yes, these resources were actually given to citizens on the ground. We think local government has a much bigger role to play. And finally, citizens. Citizens, as they are grouped in associations, in trade unions, in private sector, in NGOs, and so on. We have a tendency to bring NGOs and citizens on at the last minute, or to bring them on simply as an implementing partner when the strategy has all been designed and defined. We think, you know, the functional state has all of the organizations within the state which are functional. So citizens should be part of defining solutions right from the inception, right from the time that you are conceiving and designing that solution. And they should be part of implementation. And once again, they should hold government accountable in terms of what was the impact of what was done, what was, where the budget spent as they should, was the work done as it should be. And the final element that I would say as examples, next slide, is, you know, one of the things we are doing to respond to the crisis at the humanitarian level is cash transfer. Can we use cash transfers as an opportunity to build up the regional or the national databases so that in the future, we know more about where these populations are, what is their food security situation. So as we are responding to the humanitarian crisis, can we collect data at the level of the state that will enable it to plan better and to be more proactive in the future? I've spoken about local governments for monitoring and evaluation. I've talked about citizens associations being a part of it. And then can we have those most vulnerable groups that are suffering really from food insecurity, women, young people, children, and so on? Can they integrate the decision-making processes so that the vulnerable groups are having a say in these solutions and also having a say in accountability? And finally, are we strengthening ministries, local governments, sector governments for the recruitment, the training, and the promotion of personnel that actually reinforce state presence throughout the national territory? So those are some of the thoughts from the strategy side. Baba, sorry, I'm right on on your time. Let me stop there and then hand it back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this. You've given us an overview of what needs to be done. And actually, if I try to relate to the question that we have, are we prepared? Are we ready? Is Africa ready to feed its population? The question, the answer could be, wow, there's still a lot to be done. And given, based on the inputs that our speakers, our panelists shared previously, we are already on track, but a lot still has to do. And I looked at the time, we've almost covered the time that we had to spend together. Then I will go back to our panelists and just give
maybe Baba, there are 2 hands up. I don't know if we can just give them a minute. There are 2 hands up.
Yes.
In the chat.
So let's start with Mr. Mashogu. I hope I did not make a mistake.
Yeah,
Hi,
it's
yes.
Yeah, you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. You have the floor.
Okay. I've learned quite a lot today, and I'm really excited for this. Thank you for tagging me along, and yeah, it has been great. So I have one thought about what Madame said. She was talking about organic farming. Organic farming never works in especially developing countries. It's not working in developed countries, despite the fact that people are ready to pay for the premium price. So in Africa, what we need is fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers, because they boost the production quite a lot. And I'm sharing that from experience because I've done it. So imagine today, over half of the population in the world, throughout the world, is fed thanks to synthetic fertilizers. You cannot compare what synthetic fertilizers do with, let's say, manure. An example, I'll be quick. An example, so we have the urea. Urea has got 46% nitrogen, and nitrogen is what? Nitrogen is basically food. You cannot compare it to manure. Manure has got probably 5% or 4%. That's well decomposed manure. So at the end of the day, you realize that you need 100 kgs of fertilizer per hectare, and that's plenty enough. And for manure, you need 10 tons to 30 tons to supply the required nitrogen. So the moment somebody says organic farming, that will never work. That's my thought, but thank you very much for the great lesson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Machogu. With your intervention, we see that we still have a lot to talk about among ourselves. It's actually a matter of how do we talk to each other, and how do we find suitable solutions for our own sake. And still this falls into what have been described by Madam Kawala, who was actually explaining the fact that if this has to be functioning, we need to have functional states that are actually implementing these strategies. So we had a second hand.
The hand was Attention Francis. I don't know if he is still there. And while he's coming on, Baba, just to note that maybe the next talk will be, we will have to have a talk on organic farming, because Bram van der Waal in the chat is having a different opinion from Mashogu, and feeling that organic farming is working and that agroecology is the future. So I think we have some nice topics.
That's what we said. We have to talk. Yeah. So then let me go back to our panelists, and for a last round, each of them will have his or her last word before we close. So let's start with Ayo. Let's start with you.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, based on all that's been discussed, I would just also want to say that challenges will always remain, right? As you grow, as you develop as a country, there'll be challenges, and there's no country that didn't have to develop its agricultural ecosystem before it could become a developed country. So I would just advise that, or my closing remark would be that we should keep being proactive and not always wait for crisis before we respond. Like one of the panelists were talking before, it was bird flu. It went from bird flu, it went to COVID-19. From COVID-19, it went to Russia, Ukraine, and now we are talking about climate change. Who knows what will happen after climate change, or what will be the next challenge? So it's just to create the awareness that we need to brace up our food ecosystem generally, and that all stakeholders need to work collaboratively to ensure that we solve this food security crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Collaboration between key stakeholders. Thank you. That's one keyword that we take as a takeaway. Then, Monsieur Belfadla, vous êtes avec nous. Quel est le mot de conclusion que vous pouvez partager avec l'ensemble de nos auditeurs?
Mais vous parlez anglais, j'ai rien compris. Hein.
Vous m'entendez maintenant?
Non, même non, je vous entends, mais je ne parle pas anglais, monsieur.
Ah, d'accord.
Donc, je n'ai pas compris tous les trucs, je n'ai pas compris. Pour la prochaine fois, c'est en français, je vais m'intervenir. Hein.
D'accord, merci. Mais de toutes les façons, nous avons surtout retenu de votre intervention qu'il y a beaucoup de mesures techniques qui ont été proposées et c'est important pour les États de les prendre en compte afin qu'on puisse effectivement résoudre le problème de la crise alimentaire en Afrique. Merci. Now let's move to you, Dr. Gudula.
Thank you very much, Strategies, for giving us an opportunity to talk about our continent and positioning our continent. And what is clear, we are the food basket of the world. Let us seize this opportunity to do our part so that we can benefit, and those people who are into farming, especially those at the base of the pyramid, can also benefit. And we need to start making commitments. We are discussing this important topic, but probably a number of farmers are not aware that we are discussing this. And on behalf of Good Leisure Farm and our network, we are committing two things. We have our own TV, our webcast, Good TV. We are going to continue informing farmers down there about what happens, what is being discussed, what is being planned, what is being analyzed. Secondly, next month, we are launching our e-learning platform for farmers, for agribusiness, where we are putting our incubation center online for people to learn from their own places at their own comfort. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gudula. So with IO, we said we need collaboration between the key stakeholders, and with you, key information to farmers at the local level is also the key for a great production, for a great contribution to the agro food ecosystem. Thank you. Now with you, Mr. Obi, what could be your final words?
Thank you very much, Baba. My final word would be that we develop strong partnership within the continent. And when I say strong partnership, I'm not just talking about the professionals. We must make our interventions as far as food and nutrition security is concerned, farmer-centered. We must practically address the concerns of African farmers, because if we want to be secure in food, we have all it takes. We have the human and physical resources. What is needed is to ensure that we create an enabling environment for all the actors to operate and operate in peace. Invest as much as possible in agriculture. We must provide technology. We must look at the critical population dynamics, the youths and the women, to bring them in. And above all, our leaders and ourselves as professionals, we must show commitment that we can feed Africa. We cannot be begging for food in China, in Vietnam, and in other parts of the world. We must feed ourselves, grow what we eat, and eat what we grow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Obi. So before I hand over to Ka for her last word too, I see there's Kadiatu Fofana, because you've been trying to contribute so far, and due to technology or the connection, you didn't have the chance. So maybe this is the floor that I'm giving you so that you can also contribute to the talk.
Yeah, hello everyone. I am Kadiatu Fofana from Sierra Leone. I am an agripreneur. I've been working on agribusiness as well. Actually, I agree with the previous speaker about the partnership. We all have the resources in Africa to go and eat whatever we want to, but I think the collaboration is not too there. And for that, I have interest on what Dr. Is it Gudula? I don't know how to call the name, because I'm also working
it
on
is
something
Dr.
similar.
Gudula.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gudula. I'm working on digital aspect, like creating a portal wherein farmers can get connected to buyers easily, because this problem of market linkage and access to the market is key in my country. I've been to a village wherein I saw agricultural produce go to waste due to the lack of access to the market. So that's the reason why I started that initiative. I try to bring them together. Like, the platform is about registering the farmers and also register the buyers, but I do it in a commission base, like not from the farmers, but from the buyers. If you want to buy, I will save you the time from searching and transportation and all. I will be the one to like connect you directly, and the farmers will do the delivery to you. So I would like to work with Doctor, because I also have started working with someone to develop the app. In that app, there is also a space where farmers can learn agri extension services so that they can be equipped on agricultural knowledge. So I don't know. I would love to connect with Doctor if there is a way. I would love to work with her.
Okay, thank you very much, Kadiatu Fofana. This is also why such a platform, such a talk is important, to connect people together. And we see that Dr. Gulula has already shared her contacts, so you can see them into the chat, so that the two of you can continue the conversation privately. So thank you very much for all your contributions. Ka, can I come back to you for your last word after listening to everyone?
Yes, Baba, thank you so much to all of our speakers. I think that last intervention by Kadiatu Fofana, connecting with Dr. Gudula there to talk, to use technology, right? Both of them, Dr. Gudula was talking about the e-learning platform that they are launching, and Kadiatu is developing an app for farmers. So we see that within Africa, we have the innovation and the know-how to be able to, really address our problems with innovation. I think the panelists have said it all. They have talked about collaboration between all of the stakeholders. They have talked about the fact that we must take on this responsibility of feeding ourselves I think that coincides with what I was talking about in terms of the functionality of the state. If we are going to call ourselves countries, and if we are going to want to hold our head up high in with other nations, then we must be able to feed ourselves. And I think that we have seen here that we are not lacking anything. We have the know-how, we have the resources, we have to simply implement all of these wonderful strategies which have already been developed. So a big, huge thank you, Dr. Gudula, Ernest Obi, Omotosho, Odunayo, let me call you by your full name, and Mr. Ben Fadal, who unfortunately had some technical difficulties and we could not really get his full experience, but we got the perspective from Morocco and the ideas from there. Thank all of you. I think together we will always be building our continent and rising up to our challenges. Thank you, everyone, and have an excellent Friday to end of the week. It's not yet Friday, Thursday and Friday, and the rest of the weekend as well. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, and see you.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Dear Kadiatu, do you still, do you hear me? Are you still there, Kadiatu? I think your microphone is off. No. Then we will send you Dr. Gudula's contacts through your email address. Thank you.